Do not open that crate, hissed Varnak, the lead Zalari biology student, backing away toward the wall with his cranial fins twitching. It's sedated. Probably. Maybe. But if it wakes up, you said it's injured, said Jackson Strayer, squinting at the claws that had punctured clean through the titanium mesh of the cage's side. I don't see a wound. It bit through a boron steel support girder, Varnak snapped. That is the wound. Its teeth cracked. It broke itself. I told you. Untreatable. Unapproachable. Unmanageable. Sounds like a Maine Coon with a toothache, Jackson muttered, stepping closer. The alien students recoiled in unison. It is not a coon, said Yithril, the second student, in a tight voice. It is a Class V Predatory Apex. It chews through hull plating. It uses sonar to scramble the nervous systems of prey. It once dislocated an instructor's entire arm by shrieking. Yeah? I've had a St. Bernard scream in my face and drag me across an asphalt road. Let me see the creature. No, Varnak said, blocking his path. You are not equipped. He looked Jackson up and down, a human veterinarian. A primitive. You treat cows, dogs, cats, birds, lizards, sometimes the occasional sugar glider, Jackson said, pushing up the sleeves of his faded green scrubs. And one time a llama that tried to kick my spleen out of my spine. But I've never seen an alien apex predator, so either let me do my job or take it back to whatever death planet it came from. The crate let out a sound. Not a roar. Not a growl. More like a disgruntled purr, but deeper, like a mountain collapsing under its own weight. My ancestors, whispered Varnak, flattening himself against the wall. Jackson crouched by the crate. The mesh had been twisted inward like a set of jaws had gripped it from the inside. Through the gaps, he could see a massive eye slitted, reflective, and trained on him with unsettling focus. I'm going to need a bigger syringe, Jackson said, standing. Can you get me the sedative you used? Varnak tossed a small pink vial onto the table. It did nothing. We tranquilized it with enough to put down 3 bulk grazers. It blinked twice and resumed gnawing. Jackson picked up the vial, read the label, and frowned. Yeah, that's not gonna work. Too fast-acting and too weak. You hit it with surface-level stuff. You need something that seeps into the muscle. Slows it down from the inside out. He scanned the alien lab's supply shelf, found a blue-topped injector that resembled a turkey baster with a needle, and filled it with the catalyst he brought from Earth, a custom blend he used for large, aggressive dogs with liver issues. You're going to die, Varnak muttered. Maybe, Jackson said, unlocking the crate's side port with a hiss. But I'm gonna fix your big kitty first. The alien students screamed in unison as he opened the port. The creature inside shifted. It uncurled slowly, revealing a body the size of a small car, covered in overlapping plates of deep red and black chitin. Its tail was longer than Jackson's entire body and ended in a jagged hook. It had 4 legs, each jointed backward, and a head that vaguely resembled a panther's if a panther had 6 eyes and tusks. Its mouth opened slightly and it made a low, vibrating noise that rattled Jackson's teeth. He stepped forward. The alien students bolted from the room. Hey there, big fella, Jackson said carefully, his voice low and calm. You're in pain, huh? That tooth's bothering you. The creature opened its mouth wider. One of its enormous fangs was cracked horizontally, a jagged triangle missing from the side, exposing raw pulp and nerves. The surrounding gum was inflamed and bleeding. Yeah, that's gotta suck, Jackson said. I'm gonna give you something for the pain, all right? He moved slowly, deliberately, syringe in hand. The creature didn't pounce. It watched him, tail twitching. When he was within reach, Jackson gently placed his free hand against its shoulder plate. Easy. The creature shuddered, then leaned into the touch. Jackson inserted the needle just below the plate into a soft patch of skin. The creature tensed, then slowly relaxed. There we go. That's gonna take a minute to kick in. You're doing great. The creature laid its enormous head on the floor, I still watching him. Jackson sat cross-legged beside it, pulling out a portable dental scanner from his bag. It took 5 minutes to get a full read on the tooth's damage. It would need to come out. He'd seen worse in pit bulls. Never in something with a 3-foot molar. When the students finally peeked back in, Jackson was elbow-deep in the creature's mouth, humming a country tune. You're alive, Yithril said in disbelief. Still working on it, Jackson said. You got dental forceps? Or something that can grip a chunk of bone about this big? He held up his hands about a foot apart. Varnak just stared at him. You tranquilized it. Sort of, Jackson said. I numbed the pain and calmed the nerves. It's not sedation, it's cooperation. But it is a predator. Yeah, and it's hurting. Right now, it wants help more than it wants food. Varnak hesitated, then ducked into the supply closet. 20 minutes later, Jackson sat on the floor next to a bucket-sized molar and a creature that was now licking its paw and making a sound like a purring engine. I told you, he said, wiping sweat off his brow. Big kitty. 3 days later, he returned to check the creature's healing. The lab was reinforced with a new door, one with human-style locks. The alien students watched from behind a safety barrier. It's eating again, Varnak said. It has not attempted to dismember anyone since the procedure. See? Pain makes even apex predators a little cranky, Jackson said, stepping into the pen. The creature perked up and bounded over slowly, carefully. It bumped its massive skull against his chest and made a satisfied warble. Yeah. Missed you too, buddy. He checked the gums. Clean. Healing. No inflammation. The students stared in silence. I want to study your methods, Yithril said finally. You communicated with it using gestures. You applied empathy. Jackson shrugged. I treated it like a patient, not a threat. But it is a threat. Sure, Jackson said, lowering his voice. But so's a Doberman with a broken leg. Doesn't mean you don't help it. The creature curled around him like a scaly cat, tail flicking contentedly. Varnak made a noise of protest. You have created an attachment. I didn't create anything. It chose to trust me. You are not trained in xenopsychology. Nope, just good at picking up when someone's hurting. Doesn't matter what planet they're from. Yithril tilted his head. Perhaps we were wrong. Jackson chuckled. You said it was untreatable. I said it was a big kitty with a sore tooth. He stood, brushing off his scrubs. Now, if you want me to train you to do what I did, you're gonna have to learn how to get drooled on without panicking. The creature sneezed. Jackson was instantly covered in a layer of glittery mucus. Lesson 1, he said, sighing. Later that week, a delegation from the Interstellar Biological Ethics Board arrived. The creature had apparently been designated a Level 7 biohazard. Its presence in a student lab was now under review. Jackson was invited reluctantly to explain himself. He stood before a semicircle of officials, each dressed in layered robes and badges. You entered a containment zone without authorization, one said. Creature was in pain. You administered unapproved pharmaceuticals. I used what worked. You allowed the creature to form a bond with you. Jackson crossed his arms. Would you rather it stayed violent? The officials whispered among themselves. The creature, sitting calmly by the door, let out a soft whine. Jackson knelt beside it. You're gonna be okay, he said quietly. No more cages. The lead official turned. We are reevaluating its classification. If it can be socialized, it could become part of the Unified Xenological Study Program. Only if it consents, Jackson said. It's not a lab rat. The official hesitated. You will oversee its care? Jackson nodded. Very well. But if it reverts, it won't. The creature nuzzled his side. The official sighed. What is its designation? Jackson looked at the beast and smiled. I call it Muffin. The alien delegation stared. Why? Because Bone Crusher Death Cat felt a little dramatic. By the end of the semester, Muffin was the unofficial mascot of the xenobiology wing. Jackson had taught 4 students how to treat minor injuries without getting mauled. Muffin, in turn, had learned to sit, stay, and only eat the snacks he was handed. Jackson returned home to Earth 6 months later, a little richer, a little more tired, and with an interstellar veterinary certification in his back pocket. When his new clinic opened, the sign out front read, Strayer Veterinary Services Domestic, Exotic, and Extraterrestrial, and in the corner of the waiting room sat a massive, reinforced cushion. reserved for one very big kitty. The first inkling that something was off came when the lights flickered, not the usual soft hum of recalibrating energy grids, but a brief, sharp stutter, like the station itself had hiccuped. Jackson looked up from the diagnostic panel he was using to monitor Muffin's sleep patterns. The creature had taken to napping in cycles of 17 minutes and then thrumming at a frequency that made the lab's ventilation ducts hum like tuning forks. "Is that normal?" he asked, glancing at the only other person in the observation chamber, a young Zarnathi intern named Quillix who had been assigned to shadow him for the week. Quillix's pupils contracted into vertical slits. "No. Station diagnostics would have flagged that. Unless someone's rerouting power manually." Jackson let out a breath. "Terrific. Can you check? I'm unauthorized to access the central core. You're also lucky I don't care about station hierarchy. Pull up the conduit map." The Zarnathi hesitated, then tapped rapidly at the console with 3 of his elongated digits. The screen shifted to a schematic of the station's lower grid. A bright red blip pulsed near the xenobiology wing. "That's not sanctioned. Those power levels, someone's running containment overrides." Jackson stood up. "Where's Muffin's secondary lockout system?" "Offline. It was disconnected during the last behavioral analysis." "Why?" Quillix looked uneasy. "There was a directive from the behavioral oversight desk. They wanted to see how the subject reacted to unstructured environment variables." Jackson swore under his breath. "You're telling me they turned off the fail-safes as an experiment?" Quillix gave a quick nod. "Yes, but only under observation. The subject was never left unattended." Jackson pointed at the screen. "And now someone's in there rerouting power while my patient's asleep and unrestrained." Before Quillix could answer, the intercom crackled. "Unauthorized entity detected in Xenohabitat C, motion sensors disabled. Door access overridden." Jackson was already moving. "Stay here and lock the door behind me." He jogged down the corridor, passing 2 maintenance drones frozen mid-cycle. The air felt different, drier, like the filtration system had shifted modes without notice. A low vibration moved through the floor, barely perceptible except through the soles of his boots. The door to Xenohabitat C was ajar. Not wide enough to walk through, but just enough to leak a thin sliver of light into the corridor. Jackson pressed his ear to the seam. He didn't hear growling or metal tearing, just a soft, rhythmic shifting, like something huge breathing. He pushed the door open the rest of the way. Inside, Muffin was awake, but not agitated. In fact, the creature was standing very still, body poised, eyes narrowed toward the far side of the enclosure. A figure clad in matte black exo armor stood near the rear wall, holding a palm-sized device that emitted a faint blue pulse. "Don't move," Jackson said. The figure turned. The helmet was featureless, save for a single red strip across the faceplate. "You're not authorized to be here. Neither are you." Jackson stepped forward slowly. "Put that down." The armored intruder tilted their head. "This is a sanctioned retrieval. The specimen is being reassigned." "By whose authority?" No answer. Just a subtle lowering of the device. Muffin let out a low, clicking noise. His tail rose, rigid. Jackson raised both hands. "Easy. We're not doing this in front of him." The intruder took a step back. "You've created dependency. It compromises the specimen's value. He's not merchandise." "Then explain the behavioral lock I just bypassed." Jackson pointed at the device. "What does that thing do?" The intruder hesitated, then answered, "Neural dampener. Temporary." Muffin took a step forward, claws tapping against the resin flooring. "Turn it off," Jackson said. No, Jackson took another step. "You clearly don't know what that sound means." The intruder didn't respond. Muffin's clicking deepened, rhythmic, pulsing faster, like a countdown. Jackson had only heard that once before when Muffin had been dreaming and startled awake. It wasn't a threat. It was a warning. "Back away and drop the device," Jackson said. "Right now. This is a research-grade neural scan. It won't harm him. I don't care. He doesn't want it near him." Muffin moved again. The intruder raised the device. Jackson lunged. The device clattered to the floor as Jackson slammed into the armored figure, knocking them sideways. The red strip on the helmet flickered. The intruder tried to grab him, but Jackson shoved his elbow into the wrist joint, wrenching the glove sideways. Behind them, Muffin let out a sound that could have shattered glass if the walls weren't reinforced. The intruder froze. Jackson rolled away, landing hard on one knee. "You're going to leave. And you're not coming back." The figure picked up the device and backed toward the door. "You don't understand what you're protecting. Try me. He's not the only one of his kind. But he's the only one that doesn't kill indiscriminately. You think that's natural?" Muffin growled. "Go," Jackson said. The figure disappeared through the door without another word. Jackson exhaled slowly and turned. Muffin's eyes were wide, pupils dilated, but he hadn't moved any closer. Jackson approached carefully. "Easy, bud. It's over." Muffin lowered his head and let out a slow exhale that smelled faintly of metal and ozone. Later that evening, Jackson sat in the debriefing room, arms crossed, facing a panel of 3 station officials, none of whom looked particularly pleased. "You assaulted a member of an intelligence unit," said the one in the center, a thin Turvani with translucent skin and an expression like someone had just spilled soup on his favorite datapad. "That's a violation of station conduct." He pointed a neural dampener at my patient, which was part of a classified behavioral assessment, which no one informed me about. The official on the right, a Hishari with a crest of bioluminescent nodules, leaned forward. "We didn't expect the subject to respond defensively." "He was defending me," Jackson said. "That's different." There was a silence. The Turvani adjusted his cuffs. "We're aware the creature has developed preferences, but that does not excuse physical interference with a sanctioned operation." Jackson stood. "You want to study him? Great, but you do it with consent, with respect, or not at all." He walked out before they could respond. Back in the xenohabitat, Muffin was curled near the transparent barrier, eyes half-lidded. Jackson sat beside him on the other side. Quillix approached, holding a tablet. "They're reviewing your status. Figures. They won't remove you. The subject refuses to interact with anyone else." Jackson leaned his head back against the wall. "They'll try again." Quillix nodded. "Probably. But next time, they'll send someone quieter. I need to increase the security grid. Can you access the maintenance schedule?" "Yes." "Good. We'll build in a dummy protocol. Something that pings false alerts every time someone tampers with the feed." Quillix blinked. "That's against policy. So was breaking into this room." The Zarnathi considered him. "Understood." Jackson stood and stretched. "I'll file a full report. Just leave out the part where I tackled a guy in body armor." Quillix tilted his head. "What shall I put instead?" "Just say, patient responded poorly to unauthorized presence. Handler de-escalated." "Noted." As Quillix left, Muffin uncurled and approached the glass. Jackson pressed his palm to it. The creature mirrored him, massive paw resting against the same spot. "You and me, Muffin. We don't need anyone's permission to exist." The creature let out a breath and settled back down, the low hum of his contentment vibrating through the floor. Muffin's breathing was steady, slow, rhythmic, and just loud enough to be heard through the reinforced glass. Jackson sat cross-legged on the floor, a portable ultrasound unit balanced on his lap, wand poised against the thick muscle just behind Muffin's left foreleg. The creature didn't move. A week had passed since the incident with the intruder. Station security had pretended to launch an investigation, but it was clear they were more interested in containing questions than culprits. "Looks like the bruising's almost gone," Jackson murmured, watching the grainy image dance across the screen. "You metabolize trauma faster than a greyhound on a sugar drip." He adjusted the wand slightly. The screen flickered again, revealing a small pocket of fluid deeper in the muscle. "All right, that's new." Muffin's tail twitched once. "Don't worry, not dangerous. Probably just a residual hematoma." I'll drain it with a microtap and you won't even feel it. The lab door hissed open behind him. Please don't be an ethics committee. It's Yithril, came the reply. And I brought the sterile cannula you requested. Jackson didn't turn. You're a lifesaver. Did you pre-prime it with anticoagulant? Yes. I followed your instructions exactly. This time. Appreciate it. All right, hand it over and pull up the vascular overlay. Yithril entered and tapped the console. A transparent projection of Muffin's circulatory system lit up on the adjacent wall. You're remarkably calm, Yithril noted. Given the recent breach, I'm channeling all my anxiety into being medically thorough, Jackson said, accepting the cannula. And Muffin's been unusually cooperative. He hasn't tried to eat a single maintenance drone all week. Yithril settled into a crouch beside him, keeping a respectful distance from the creature. I reviewed the footage. He positioned himself between you and the intruder. That suggests a protective instinct. Or he just doesn't like guys in matching boots. Still, that level of loyalty is unprecedented for his species. Or even for most domesticated ones. Yeah, well, I've learned not to underestimate what's possible when you treat someone like a person instead of a threat. Jackson wiped the skin over the fluid pocket with a disinfectant patch and carefully inserted the cannula. Muffin didn't flinch. 1 milliliter per second. Any faster and we risk collapsing the capillary web. Yithril monitored the extraction on the screen. You know, when we were first assigned to observe the subject, we debated whether it was sentient. Jackson glanced up. And now, I'm increasingly convinced he's sapient. That's a big leap, perhaps. But he doesn't just react. He assesses. He weighs outcomes. He's capable of restraint. I've seen toddlers with less impulse control. Yithril's crest pulsed a soft blue. We submitted a report to the central board. Suggested reclassification. Jackson raised a brow. They'll love that. Probably not. But they can't ignore the data. Especially after your encounter. The cannula beeped softly, extraction complete. Jackson sealed the wound with medical adhesive and disposed of the fluid capsule in the biohazard bin. I'm going to run a protein analysis later, just to make sure his immune system isn't doing anything weird. Yithril nodded. I'll assist. Jackson stood and stretched, joints popping. He's lucky. That fluid buildup could have started compressing nerves if it went unnoticed. Unlikely anyone else would have noticed. Yeah, Jackson said, brushing his hands off on his pants. That's kind of the problem. Yithril hesitated. The other reason I came. There's a visitor in the observation deck. Human. Says he's with your licensing board. Jackson frowned. I didn't request an audit. He claims it's routine. I'll bet. Reluctantly, Jackson walked through the corridor toward the observation deck. The human was easy to spot, short, balding, and wearing a pressed gray suit that looked out of place next to the polished polymer walls. He was tapping something into a sleek data pad. Dr. Strayer, I presume, the man said without looking up. Just Jackson. Samuel went. Interplanetary Veterinary Compliance Office. I'm here to conduct a performance and ethics review. I'm not even under contract anymore. You're still practicing in a registered facility, which means our oversight applies. Jackson folded his arms. And this has nothing to do with the board trying to reassert control after I stopped their pet experiment? Went smiled politely. I'm not at liberty to discuss internal politics. I'm only here to assess whether the subject under your care is being managed according to interspecies welfare standards. Fine. You want to see my protocols? I already have them. I'd like to observe your next interaction. Unfiltered. Jackson gestured toward the habitat. Be my guest. They walked in together. Muffin was still resting but lifted his head at the sound of the door. His pupils narrowed at when, but he didn't move. Jackson approached slowly, pulling a small scanner from his pocket. Hey, buddy. We've got a guest. Just a looky-loo, no poking or prodding. Muffin blinked once. Jackson crouched, letting the scanner hover over the creature's thoracic region. Checking your respiratory rhythm. Shouldn't take long. Went stood at a distance, tapping his pad. You don't use restraints. Nope. You don't use a translator matrix. I don't need one. You're relying entirely on behavioral cues. I'm relying on trust. Went made a note. You understand that if the subject is deemed a threat, he could be decommissioned. Jackson paused. He's not a threat. He's just never been given a reason to feel safe before. Went looked up. You believe you've redefined this species' behavioral baseline? I didn't redefine anything. I just stopped treating him like a monster. Jackson turned. Look, do whatever paperwork you need to. But if you're planning to recommend euthanasia, you'll have to go through me. Went stared at him for a moment, then closed his pad. You're emotionally compromised. Maybe. But I'm also the only one who knows how to treat an abscess under 3 layers of chitin without triggering a panic response. Another pause. Then Went turned and walked out without another word. Back in the lab, Jackson found Quillix reorganizing the surgical tray. You had a visitor, the Zarnathi said. Yeah. Audit guy. I don't think he liked me. I reviewed the footage from the last 10 days. There's something else. Jackson raised an eyebrow. Good news or bad? Ambiguous. Muffin's vocalizations, they've shifted. Subtly. Tonal variance that wasn't present before. Let me guess. Mimicry? Not quite. More like adaptation. He's matching your cadence. Jackson leaned against the counter. He's picking up my speech pattern? Not the words. Just the rhythm. The pauses. As if he's trying to communicate on your terms. Jackson scratched his chin. That's either very clever or very unsettling. Possibly both. They stood in silence for a moment. Do we know what he wants? Jackson asked. Quillix considered. I think he wants to stay. A week later, the compliance report arrived. No violations found. No recommendations for removal. Just a dry paragraph acknowledging that the subject was stable under current care and not exhibiting behaviors warranting relocation. Jackson read it twice, then tossed it into the recycler. The lab was quiet. Yithril was cataloging samples. Quillix was assembling a nutrient supplement. Muffin was asleep, tail flicked over his snout. Jackson walked over and knelt beside him. You won, he whispered. Muffin cracked one eye open. Don't let it go to your head, Jackson added. You're still not allowed to eat the cleaning drones. The eye closed again. Jackson leaned back and let himself relax. For the first time in months, there were no alarms, no breach alerts, no visitors in suits. Just the soft hum of a creature at peace and a quiet lab that finally felt like home.